Hello everyone, Lexi Avelica here. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite art journaling supplies. Though a quick disclaimer before we get started, as with my journaling process, it's not required or perhaps necessarily normal to have so many different tools and supplies that you use. I am someone who aspires to become an artist, and I have a great interest in collecting art supplies, which is why I have so many. And I'm not even showing you all of what I have in this video. I'm only showing you the things that I reach towards for the most that are up there in my favorites. You don't necessarily need any of these things to art journal. You don't even need any of these things to do normal journaling or necessarily traditional art as a whole. This is just what I like to use, what I've collected. I have spent entirely way too much money on my art supplies, and I do not recommend anyone spend in the way that they do in a short period of time. I've collected most of these in the past, let's say 2 to 3 years or so. I have a little bit of a problem, and I'm not afraid to say that. But first, we're starting with a journaling classic with mild liners. There are 2 different kinds of mild liners. There is the standard mild liner with the bold chisel tip and then the finer point on the other end. And then we have the brush mild liner that has the brush tip and a super fine tip on the other end. I really like the super fine tip and having that versatility, which is why I own pretty much every single color of mild liner. I'm showing you the orange one right now. Most of the supplies that I'll be showing you is going to be orange because orange is my top tier, all-time favorite color. It's my happy color. It makes me feel genuinely a sense of joy and satisfaction anytime I look at it that's unparalleled. I used to have orange hair even, and I miss it dearly every single day that I don't have it, but black hair is the fate that I'm condemning myself to for the time being. But we're going to do a little bit of swatching of everything that I have to show for you today. So first, starting with the brush tip, you can create a wonderful array of line thickness, and the tip is super resilient. I've never had issues with it fraying, and I've had the brush tips for a very long time. I'll also do a comparison of the super fine and the fine tip for the mild liners. It's good to have the versatility of both. In my calendar doodles that I've shown in a previous video, I used mild liners to do the header decoration in the top of each month for the calendar doodles. And I'll typically use the super fine tip of the mild liner because it's just a little bit too thick for the standard mild liner to kind of produce the art that I'm looking for. But the fine tip, the slightly larger one, is great for other purposes, including in my Hobonichi planner. I will often use it as a color solid border to separate the blocks in the left-hand side of the page where I write my summaries about the media that I am exposing myself to in that day, and just the little like color-coded bullet notes that I have about my day. So those are the mild liners. Next we have, and I'm not showing everything in orange, only the things that I have in orange. If it's not going to be orange, it's going to be black. And this is I believe the Zebra disposable brush pen. I can't read the scripts on the pen. I'm not very good with languages other than English. That is a weakness of mine. I only know teeny tiny bits of Russian to communicate with my cat, who is a Russian blue, as a little bit of a bit. But this is great. I have the other versions of this one that are dedicated to different tip sizes, but this one has 2 different tip sizes and is dual-ended. On this side, you have a slightly smaller tip, and these are great. Oh, this one's a little bit dry. I've had it for a while. I think I have my fresher one in my travel pencil case that I put in my purse at all times. Yeah, this end is a lot better, but this is the thicker end on the side that has a little pen clip, and the other side's a bit thinner. But these are great. They do have a problem with fraying a little bit after a while, so you can't push too hard. But I find if you push hard, it creates a very interesting effect that's reminiscent of lino cuts when you have just that natural rough rawness that's difficult to control. But it does make things like lettering, which I attempt on occasion, a little bit difficult if you have the tip fraying. But it doesn't fray as aggressively as, let's say, the Tombow dual brush pen on that very thick brush tip can fray really aggressively and be very annoying. Next, we have the Pentel Finito pen. This is a more recent one that I have. It's the extra fine porous point pen. I really like it, and it doesn't have a problem with bleeding through paper. I believe it's pigment-based ink, so I can use watercolor with it or any other water-based pen. To catch up at the previous one that I just showed you, the Zebra disposable brush pen, I believe those are water-based because I do use them sometimes for line art and have a problem with it seeping through the page, not seeping through the page, bleeding when I use water-based markers over the top or watercolor. But this one has no problem with it. I like the line, I like the thickness of the tip, even though it doesn't seem extra fine to me. This seems more standard fine. It seems reminiscent of about like 0.5 micron, maybe a little bit under that, but definitely not a 0.3 in my uneducated opinion. Well, I don't know if I can say uneducated. I know a lot about art supplies and I use them every single day. And I consider myself a little bit of a connoisseur, but not an expert. Next, we have another orange supply. This one is very recent acquisition. The Equaline Royal Talons brush pen. These are water-based pens, or watercolor markers. And I really like these. I've only had them for a very short period of time. I got them, I think, last month. But I really like the brush tip. It's really nice. And I really like the very watercolor look to it. And it has like the variations in the opacity and the general look of the lines that you make with it. It's really great for hand lettering, which is something I'm bad at on account of having bad handwriting, but I like to dabble a little bit for just decorative things or like having big titles in my art journal that declares like something important that happened. So it has really good use for that. It's not as noticeable with the color variation in the orange, but with the red, which is the other color that I own in this pen, it has a very stark effect that I really enjoy. But orange is my favorite color, so I had to show you all my orange supplies. Next, we have something that I don't use as often in my art journals because I'm concerned about tearing up the paper, but I use it a lot in my art in general, is my Posca pens. This one is, I believe, the 1M thickness. I have most tip sizes. I don't have the super big ones because I don't tend to work that big using paint markers, other than in the color black because I think that's more relevant or useful. I also think I have a white one as well for getting down a base layer of paint on a canvas. Though I should probably not do that and I should just probably use gesso instead. It's a little bit of a bad habit of mine for when I didn't really know how to use paint pens that well or have no experience with acrylic. And I was just making a lot of these really cute sad cats paintings that I'll put a picture up on screen if I remember. But I use the Posca pens for that a lot, and sometimes I use this in my journal, but usually I'll put down a piece of thicker paper and do it over the top of that, even though the paper will still probably peel up, and it's not entirely ideal. I tend to prefer to use this on canvas and other materials, but sometimes you just need a little bit of paint pen in your paper. And it's nice, a nice fine tip, and the color is really opaque, and it's just generally good all around. I love Posca pens, even though they are expensive and cause me a lot of heartbreak sometimes when they run down and I have to get more. But next, we have the Pentel, I believe Pentel brush sign pen. I also have a non-brush version, but I don't like the feel of that pen making contact with the paper. It's very harsh and makes an unpleasant noise. I like this one a lot because there's not like a huge variation in line thickness, so it's kind of hard to get the variation, but it still has the very slight, subtle variations that I really enjoy. I have multiple different colors of these, and I tend to enjoy using them for line art, but because they are water-based, I believe, they are not ideal for adding additional color using a water-based markers, which I own quite a lot of. I don't know if they're alcohol marker proof. I've never tested them. Next, we have the Tombow Furunosuke. These ones are also water-based, but it says they have pigment ink. I'm not really sure how much they will spread if you use water-based markers over the top of them. I don't remember the last time I've tested, at least not with the color ones. I also own black ones that I often love using for line art, but the colorful ones are great for writing things down and lettering. I really messed up that one there, but it's also, since it's got a harder tip, you get even less line variation than the Pentel Sign brush pen. And I really like it, and I also like the more faded, muted shades that this entire line of the colorful brush markers do have. I enjoy them a great deal, though I do really wish that they had color versions of the soft version of the Fineliners pens. That's a big want that I have. Next, we have one that's not exactly orange, but it's orange adjacent, and this is the Zebra Click Art pens. I think they might also be part of the Sensations line, but don't quote me on that. I like these, even though they are also water-based. You can't use them for line art if you're using water-based pens on top, but I like just the nice solid bold line. They have a really nice feel when holding them, and I really like the experience of making contact with the paper. It's very satisfying. You will notice that a lot of my justification for liking certain art supplies is based on whether or not they feel good to hold and they feel good to put down pen to paper. Next, we have something I've talked about before, which is the Uniball Signo DX .38 gel pen, which I use all the time, every single day in my Hobonichi planner for my summary notes, and I just really like it. It's a nice fine line, it's solid, they rarely ever skip. I've only had problems with a teal color variation of this brand. I've had problems with 2 of those pens, and it's the only ones I've ever had problems with, but other than that, I think they're perfect. They're solid pens. In the same vein, the same ones that I use for my Hobonichi planner, I have the Pilot Juice .38. They're also great. The orange color leaves a little bit to desired because it's a little bit light and not exactly my favorite kind of orange. Orange that veers into the territory of creamsicle is something that I tend to have mixed feelings on, but I take it in a case-by-case basis. But the Pilot Juice is still pretty solid. It's pretty legible. I really like it. I have both the Pilot Juice and the Uni Signo DX because certain colors are not existent in one line versus the other, and there's also subtle color variations between the different colors that are the same, and I like having that variety. And the Pilot Juice I have because I got a really good deal on a big pack of them, so that's part of also why I have those. Next, we have another one I mentioned in my other video, the Zebra Sarasa gel pens that I use in my calendar doodle all the time. These are great. It's a perfect line thickness. They have a wonderful color range. They never rarely skip, with exception of the honestly awful milk color line that contains pastel colors that are supposed to appear on dark paper. Those skip like a nightmare, and I do not recommend them for most applications. I use some of them. I still have a white one that I basically never use because it skips so poorly, and it's not as good as another kind of gel pen that I'm going to cover in this video that covers amazingly with its white pens, but it does have a problem of having a very short lifespan and not lasting that long. I think most white pens kind of have that problem where they lose their opacity and they end up having problems with skipping and just not working all that well, but it has less problems than this Milk Series white Sarasa gel pen. So excellent type of gel pen, but I do not recommend the Milk Series. Next, we have one that's a little bit basic that I ended up picking up on a whim, and I really like them, which is the Pentel Color Fine Point pens. They're super basic, super cheap feeling, but something about them I just really like, and I really like just the thickness of the pen and how it's just a solid line, and I really like the feeling of holding this in my hand and putting it to paper. I originally had a black one, but when I went to Savannah recently for a wedding, I went to an art store that had them open stock, and I picked up some colorful ones, including orange, my favorite color. And I was really glad to have done that. I really enjoy having the colorful ones and being able to produce just this thick line of color line art. It serves a purpose that strangely I have not had pens that are at this exact line thickness before that are in color or like even in black as far as I'm aware that feel this nice. So it did definitely fill a gap in my pens, and I find myself reaching for these more than I expect. Next, we have a classic, one that everyone's a fan of, seems like, which is the Sakura Pigma Microns. This is a 0.5 line thickness and an orange, of course. I was debating using a black one because I tend to use the black ones the most, but I still have different color ones because of course I do. I really enjoy them because they're pigment based and they're archival ink, so they're very high quality, and I feel like these pens are generally worth the money. I've had very good luck with sales to acquire most of my collection of microns that you can probably see on the screen right here, but I think that they're generally worth it, and I will always replace these pens anytime I run out of a particular color or thickness. But they're super great, they feel super nice to use. And I feel like I haven't been reaching for them a lot lately, but I think I need to reach for them more because I just think they're excellent quality. And they were one of the first ones, sort of quality art pens that I acquired and used even back in the day before I really took art seriously, because it's something was associated with manga illustration, and I kind of bought into the hype for those reasons. But really like them, highly recommend, definitely check out. The only downside of these pens is that the brush marker variation, let me get one out, it's a little bit too soft of a brush that frays super easily and does not have super good line control. I know I was talking about yearningly the brush pen that was softer for the Tombow Fudenosuke. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, I'm very sorry. But it's not the same. It's too flimsy, it's too weak, it's not strong enough. I don't tend to really like the brush for the microns. So it's only downside, but it is good if you want to use exclusively microns for a particular sketchbook page. They also have a wonderful quality of not ghosting through the page as strongly as other pens. So I can use them on cheaper sketchbooks with thinner material, more sketch pages, and not have to worry about as much ghosting. So you might want to use them for coloring in large areas. I definitely have some like well-used, well-loved gray and light gray brush pen ones that I'll use to color in large areas in sketchbooks. It's particularly one that I'll use it in a lot are these square ones that I get at Michael's that are the Artist Loft brand. Those can't tolerate a lot of materials, but they tolerate microns really well, and I will use a lot of microns in those. But next, we have another cheaper pen that I really like, which is the Zebra Sarasa Fineliner. These I can sometimes find in the dollar store, but I did get lucky and got like a good pack of them for a nice deal. I use these a lot in my Hobonichi as well for the calendar spread pages where I do a doodle every single day in there. I love doing calendar doodles. It's a little bit of a fault of mine. But they're really nice. They have a slightly muted color and they've got a nice solid tip. They feel a little bit cheap to hold, but not too cheap. They have well designed still. I really like how the clip on the pen looks, and I find them generally solid pens all around. Next, we have a classic for me, one of the earlier acquisitions when I started taking art journaling very seriously. Something I got, I believe, as a gift for myself with Christmas money I received one year. This is the Staedtler Triplus Fineliner. I've got an entire big pack with almost all the colors of them that I really, really like. And I've been using them for about 3 years now, and I have not had to replace any. And I've been using them quite heavily because they're easy within reach. I have them just like right in front of me right here. But I really like them. They have a great color range and they have a nice fine point. I think they're really solid. It gave me an artificially high opinion of this company, which has very hit or miss, honestly, products. They have a lot of cheaper range products that aren't that good, and I, for a while, had a bad habit of reaching too much to pick them up when I find Staedtler stuff in a thrift store, thinking that it's going to be all the same quality, but it's not. They have much more kid brand items under this brand that just aren't the same in terms of quality. They're not that worth it. But these Fineliners, amazing. I love them very much. I highly recommend them. Get a big pack if you can find a good sale on them, and use them as your primary fineliner. These are like my ideal fineliners compared to other ones. But there are some that I still find worth mentioning that I will talk about in a little bit. Another very popular brand of fine liner that I don't tend to care for the really thin fine liner size, which I think is the Pen 88 version. This is the Pen 68 version where it has the much thicker tip. And I really like the thick tip of this for a lot of reasons. It feels really good. I really like the design of the barrel for this pen, and I really also like that it's orange for really petty reasons. The barrel part of this is going to be orange for all the pens, and it's just the cap that has the color on it. Or actually no, for the 68 ones, the barrel is the color of the pen itself, but it's just for the normal fine liner ones, the barrel is consistently going to be 88. I also hope I'm using barrel correctly in this sense. I'm not really sure what I would call it. I don't want to call it the shaft so much, but I really like these ones, not so much the 88, but I like the 68 a lot. I like the pen thickness. I just find that the 68 have a little bit of problems of drying up faster than the Triplus fine liner. What's it called? The Triplus? Yes, Triplus fine liner. I know that I just talked about it, but I still needed to verify just to make sure I'm not spouting absolute nonsense to you and deceiving you, my wonderful viewers. But I generally like this one. I generally enjoy it. I find it very useful, and I find myself reaching for it often. Next, we have another fine liner, which is the Le Pen fine liner. These ones are really nice because they have a really smooth feel. They're a little bit more expensive than other ones and a little bit harder to find. And I don't know if they're entirely quite worth it, but I really like these. They have a really good feel, as I mentioned, and the flex brush version of these pens are amazing. I don't have an orange one to show you, but I really like the feel of it. It's a very, very fine brush pen that I find really enjoyable to write with. But the normal fine liner versions are pretty good, and they have pretty decent color selection as well. Just not something I gravitate towards as much as the other fine liners that I own. Next, we have the golden standard of gel pens, which is the Sakura Jelly Roll pens. And I own a whole bunch of these. These are the ones that the white ones really stand out and they really work well for. I also really like the very bright orange color. And they're also super great for writing on materials like washi tape. And I often will find myself using these for writing the headers in my art journal on top of washi tape, because once it dries, it stays on really well. And since you have the moonlight range that will show up on darker paper and darker tape, it just works out great, and it's something I gravitate towards the most. I used to use these metallic markers that I got really cheaply on Amazon that I'm not going to be showing you in this video because I don't even know the brand or how to suggest people to find it. I used to use those all the time, but they have since dried up, so I find myself reaching for either permanent markers or for these jelly roll pens for writing my headers in my art journal every day. Next, we have another gel pen, which is the Pentel Energel pen. I really like these. This is the 0.7 thickness. And I really like these for doing some line art because they do not smudge or smear once they're fully dried and you use watercolor pens over the top of it. They're really great for having statement, like slightly shiny line art. And I did a style where I would use, for a long time in my journals, I would use the Energel for the line art, and then I would use Crayola Super Tips for coloring things in. And it created a really nice, like, contrasting look that I really enjoyed. I might put some pictures up here on the screen of entries that I did in that style that I really like. I don't know how it translates on camera, but in person it has a really nice effect that I enjoy a great deal, that I should go back to at some point. Speaking of the Crayola Super Tips, let's just go with one of the Crayola Super Tips that I have. These are really cheap and really accessible, so like I don't ever have to feel like bad about using them because they're really easy to get more of, even though you can't buy individual ones. So if I run out, I'll have to wait till I run out enough of them before I decide that it's worth to get more of them. But I think they're really nice, they're really basic. You can get a really thick line or a really thin line by using the very tip of it. And they have a really solid color range. I've got an entire basket of all the ones that I have that I just got a big pack, and I find myself reaching for them more often than you'd think. They're just a good, solid, water-based marker that can be used for a lot of applications, like the previously mentioned style. I enjoy them. I'm not afraid to admit it. Next, we have a big favorite that I have way too many of, which is the Faber-Castell Pit Artist brush pens. I really like these. even though I was hard to win me over on them because they are quite expensive, to be honest, and I still don't know if they're entirely worth the price, but they're really great. They're really high quality. I really like the brush pen to it, even though it makes a little bit of a strange noise when you write, but the bit holding the pen feels just so quality. And it just looks good. I like it. I like taking these with me when I go places, like whenever I'm on campus for classes. I like having a bunch of them, and I sit down in a corner and I just draw scenes of what I see around me and just draw observationally and then color it in with the brush pens that I have. And I really enjoy the color range they have, though I have one qualm, which is that they do not have a satisfying full range of cool grays. I feel like they're missing a mid-tone that is making the entire color range feel a bit incomplete. So, only complaint there. Next we have one that I did complain about a little bit earlier, which is the water-based Tombow ABT brush pens. They're dual-ended. They have a very thick brush on one side, and this is the brush that frays sometimes when it works and you don't push too hard. It works amazingly. And I think that these are my favorite for coloring in large areas and doing just general coloring in for things, for anything that I have lined with a non-water-based line art. They have the other end, which I don't find myself reaching for this other end, this finer end, that much, unless I'm really desperate to color match with the colors that I filled in. I'm usually gravitating towards the brush side, though sometimes this brush side is a little bit too big for all my purposes, so it's not the best, but I honestly wouldn't have it any other way because it's really hard to find the bigger brush sizes in pens. I think the only other one that I have and is much bigger than this is the Ecoline brush pen, which is more for a very specific purpose. I would not find myself using those for coloring in anything. But speaking of coloring in, another thing that I like to use for coloring in is the Zig Fudebury brush pen. These are great. I have found these, I want to say more recently, but I know I've had them for a while. But they feel more recent in my mind. But I like these a lot. They're water-based. They're like a little bit smaller in the brush tip compared to the Tombows. They feel really light, but they still don't feel cheap or anything. They have a great color range. I really like them. And I just really like how the cap is designed. They're very iconic to me, and I think about the style of these a lot, and I will often mention these in my favorites anytime I compile a list. Next, we have another marker, which I tend to use only in certain situations in my art journal. These are the Ohuhu art marker alcohol markers. I will only use these typically if I am going to be gluing in cardstock that I've drawn on with alcohol markers, because I don't want to have to deal with bleed through unless I am doing it directly on the page and then I am gluing stuff on the other side of the page. And also for reference, my art journal is the Moleskine art sketchbook journal with blank pages. It is like the slightly thicker ones. I think it's in the 150 GSM range. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself on the screen. So it does hold up like some sufficient layers of art markers on its own, alcohol markers on its own. But it does definitely have the bleed through problems. I expected it to. I expect most paper to have bleed through problems, and I don't trust paper that purports to not have bleed through problems with alcohol markers because usually they're also very expensive, and I just don't find a reason enough to spend money. I don't mind dealing with the whole bleed through situation. It just means that I have to just think more creatively and glue some stuff in. But I really like the brush pen. It's really soft. And then I have, on these ones, I have the broad chisel tip on the other side, but I also have ones that I mistakenly ordered where it has the fine tip on the other end that I do find very helpful to have, though I kind of wish that I had gone one way where all of mine were the fine tip, because I feel like I have more application for the fine tip than I do for the broad tip, because I usually do smaller illustrations that I don't need to color in as wide of areas that don't need as much precision. This is the Ohuhu alcohol marker. I own pretty much all the colors between the two different versions. I enjoy them quite a lot. I used to be in a really big alcohol marker kick where I had to use alcohol markers for all my entries, but I've since fallen out of that, but I imagine that I will get back into it at some point. I think the moment is on the horizon. I will start using my alcohol markers more soon. But I enjoy these a lot. I enjoy them more than I enjoy Copic markers because I just think that they are more worth it. They're reasonably priced and they just seem to be function the same way. Though Copic markers do feel more luxurious to hold, you can tell the quality and where the money is coming from, and why it's so expensive, but I don't think that it's sufficiently worth it to have, and I much prefer the Ohuhu ones, even if it's very hard to buy individual markers. They do offer individual markers, I believe, online, but it's usually not worth it when you account in shipping costs. But I haven't had to refill any of my markers. I don't use them that aggressively. And I imagine that if I do run out of any things, I might just buy individual Copics to fulfill the gaps in my things, in my stock, if it's very necessary. Next, we have this pen, which I believe is the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen, where it has these real bristles and uses ink cartridges. I really like it because it produces really interesting effects, and it's a little bit hard to control, and it just feels really nice to use. And I like just the roughness to it, the rough ink brush texture. I did an entire series where I made these little cards that I colored in watercolor but inked with this pen, that were based on the Disco Elysium skills, which I'll post a picture of on screen right now if I remember. And I really like how it turned out. It was a really fun, satisfying thing to do, and I had a blast like inking with this pen, even though it took like a cold cartridge and a half to do. But I need to use this more. It's great. It doesn't really bleed through paper as much as you expect it would. And I believe it is waterproof and Copic proof, so you can do a lot with it once you have the lines down. But don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. I've not used this in a little bit for those purposes. Next, we have one Copic product that I do really like, which is the Copic multi-liner, because they just feel really good. This is the disposable version, not like the higher quality ones that's meant for refills, but it just feels so good putting pen to paper. It feels smooth, it feels nice, there's just the right amount of friction, and I just really like the design of the pen itself. And obviously, because it's Copic, it is pigment ink, and it is waterproof and Copic proof. And I find it great. I have the whole selection of different tip sizes, but again, they have the problems with their brush pens. They have a brush medium and a brush small, or at least I own a brush medium and a brush small. I don't know if there's a larger brush size. I do not like the brush size. They have a little bit of a problem of being a bit too soft and not having enough firmness that makes them a little difficult to use properly. All right, next we're getting into some colored pencils that I have, but this is the Derwent Inktense pen. I have mixed feelings when it comes to watercolor pens or watercolor pencils, but I really like this more ink-based variation of watercolor, water-activated pencils. The Inktense is just really appropriate to the name Intense, and I really enjoy it. Let me see if I have a water brush that I can use to demonstrate. Yeah, it just produces a nice, strong color, and I really like it. A lot more than most watercolor pencils that I have. And I only have a few of these, but I really like the ones that I do, and I need to gravitate towards them more often. I rarely do them directly on the paper because I don't think the paper that I use for my art journaling can handle water that much. Well, I know it doesn't, so I have to paste in watercolor paper when I work with it, but it's usually not a big fuss, and as long as I do it sparingly, I don't have to worry about bulking up my art journal too much. Next, we have the Prismacolor Kohl Erase Pencil, which I really like for doing some very colorful line art, and sometimes I'll just use it on its own because it's a nice muted version of the Prismacolor colors. I own an entire pack of these. I use them all the time. I like them a lot better than other erasable color pencils, with one exception that I'll talk about right after this. But I think they're really solid. The eraser on these suck. You can see that I've used it a bit, but I no longer use them because it just doesn't work that well. I have a favorite eraser that I use most of the time I need to erase anything, which is the high polymer Pentel eraser. It's just a really good solid white eraser that I just buy in packs pretty cheaply and use all the time. The eraser built on these, no good, no good. But I really like these. I use them all the time. I think they're great. They show up really well. And then some of the colors, like the blue ones, do not really show up on scan, so you don't have to erase everything necessarily. But I also like not erasing the line art that I do with the color erase, because I think it adds an interesting effect when you color directly on top of the color erase sketch after you've inked. It just has a nice like tinted effect that I really like. And it's not just because I'm lazy. And here's the other one I like, which is the Pilot Color Eno that I have in the 0.7 thickness, which is a mechanical pencil. And I really like it because it is super erasable and it's super fine point. So I can get super fine point sketches without having to constantly resharpen my pencil. And I have multiple different colors of these and they're super great. The eraser on this one is much better than the eraser on the Col-Erase pencils. And I just think they're super nice. And they're also nice enough that I will sometimes just not use them for sketching. I'll just use them for just writing on the page and then just keep it that way. And it just looks pretty good. I've had a couple spreads in my art journal that I've done this with, and they're some of my favorites. Next, we have the good old classic Prismacolor color pencils. This is orange again. I really like these. They're super soft. They're super high quality and luxurious. I have a big affinity for color pencils and buying super cheap ones, but I can't knock how good and solid the Prismacolor ones are. I don't use color pencils for a lot of blending or realism or anything. They're more just for, I like sketching with color pencils, and I like using color pencils in a very non-realistic way and having a lot of different contrasting colors. But I just really like the experience of writing with the Prismacolor color pencils. It's really enjoyable, and I think that they are worth the price that is asked for them. I bought an entire big set as a gift for myself at one point, and I'm really glad that I did. I just need to reach for them more often. Next, another color pencil is the Koh-i-Noor Progresso color pencils that are woodless. I really like these because they're super heavy and they're just really nice to hold. And they're pretty nice experience to write with them. They're a little bit lighter in colors, and I've noticed I'm a little bit more muted than other color pencils that I use, but I just really like the feeling of writing with them. They just feel really nice to hold, and it's just a really good sensory experience. I don't really have any other reason why I like them so much, but those are also cheap and they're very much worth the money that I pay for them. And they just got a nice, like, smooth, soft, like, feel to the pen itself. It's like plasticky that I really like. And last of the pens and such, that's not really a pen, is the Caran d'Ache Neocolor Aquarelle 2. It's a water-soluble wax pastel. I really like these because it's like writing with fancy crayons, and it's also water-soluble, so you can create some interesting watercolor effects with it. So I don't usually do that too often. Oh, I've got a lot of water on there. But it still looks pretty nice, but I tend to like them just because I like the novelty of using fancy crayons. And I have a couple of colors. I have a limited range, so I have a limited palette to work with, and I think that's really the way to go because you just create some very interesting illustrations and designs that way. So next, we have some watercolors that I like to use. I like to use this very cheap set of Prang watercolors. I use these a lot because I'm scared of using my nicer watercolors I'll talk about in a minute. It's just the standard oval set with, how many colors is that? That's 16 colors. I really like them a lot. I think they're good colors. It's good to get a nice range of things and feel less guilty about using watercolor, especially because I'm someone who's a watercolor novice. I don't really know how to use it that well. So I have concerns about my ability to use more expensive ones properly. So I feel like I'm in some way saving my more expensive ones until I'm better, which is not the best habit that I should have. I should use what I have, so it's probably best to learn from more expensive but not too expensive supplies. But I have some complexes that I'm still working on regarding allowing myself to use more high quality and expensive supplies, but I will get there in time, I'm sure of it. So for the nicer quality watercolors that I have the Winsor & Newton Cotton watercolors. So they're nice, but they're not like super nice, but they were still like, they fetched a pretty penny for my standards at least. Even though I collect art supplies, I'm still a little bit cheap when it comes to them. Oop, this one's trying to escape. I don't want you to do that. There we go. Now, I like these a lot. I need to travel more and like be able to use them when I'm out and about, because I think that I know a lot of people when they do travel illustrations and stuff, they will use watercolor because you can mix a wide variety of colors. I have too much water on my water brush, so it's not really showing these that well. But these are really nice. They're really nice quality. I like using them if I'm trying to do something where I have to have more opacity and I don't want to deal with like the really chalkiness of cheaper watercolor quality, even though the Prang ones are pretty good about not having that problem as far as cheap student grade watercolors go. If I'm looking for something a little bit more nice, I will reach towards these ones. And I have this set and I have a different set that has more standard color range. Now moving into some other stuff that I like to use for my journaling quite a lot. We have ink and ink stamps. So I have a collection of stamps, but I don't use them as often as I use my own hand-carved lino cut stamps. I have an entire series of organ-based stamps that I made for my journaling game card art, DIY Haruspicy, wherein the entire premise of that game is that you are reconstructing your body after dying in a battlefield, and you have to collect your organs and use the prompts that are on these organ cards in order to journal about yourself and your body and discern the implications of what organs and what the condition they're in will mean for your new body that you're building, and what the absences of the organs you weren't able to recover also means for your new body. So that's the background of why I have all these organ stamps here. This one is a skull that I made, and my favorite ink is to use is this Ranger Archival Inks. I have a big black pad that I don't want to bring over, but fortunately they don't have an orange, so I just have this nice yellow one. So I should have used a different stamp so I don't have to worry about contamination of the little black remaining on this when I'm stamping. I hope that's enough. Yeah, there we go. It's a little bit off color, but that's what I expected. But I really like using the stamps. They're highly high quality. They do bleed through a lot on a lot of papers, but for most purposes, I think this is the best quality ink that I gravitate towards, and I really like the color range they have and that I own. So that's what I use for stamping. They don't stamp a whole lot, but occasionally I find a situation where it's like, I really want to use one of my stamps, or I want to use one of the many other stamps that I own, which I don't own like the hugest collection. I might talk about them later, show off some of the stuff that I do have. They're just little things I picked up here and there. My favorite stamps, though, are by far letter stamps. I use those all the time in my zines especially. Next, we have my golden favorite, which is washi tape. I'm just showing two washi tapes to demonstrate the two different categories of washi tape I use the most frequently, which is the larger patterned washi tape. This one I got from an artist at a convention that I really liked. I don't remember the name, but if I do find to dig up their information, I will include it on the screen or in the description if I find it later. And then I use solid color washi tape that's a little bit thinner, and on this is where I write the information about what the date is and what day of the week it is for the headers of all of my art journal entries. I'll also put a little picture of that up on the screen, just to give you a little bit of reference if you haven't seen my other video on how I art journal. But I own about, I'm gonna say, over 500 washi tapes. I have never counted them, and I don't think that I would be able to really count them because a lot of them are also super tiny that I use for like smaller details and such. And I don't know how much of a worthwhile of a practice it's going to be to actually count them unless I'm counting them while I'm reorganizing all my washi tape. But even then, that would be a huge ask for me to do. But I really like them. I collect them. I collect art supplies and washi tape. Those are my two main collections, and I really enjoy having them, and I'm always happy to pick up new washi tape. So next is something that I do really often is I buy scrap paper from in packs from the craft store, and I just use them to just glue in my art journals all the time. I used to do this more frequently, but I haven't been doing it as much lately because I've just been suffering a little bit of a creative block. But I'll often take these packs. These are the ones I get from Michael's, where it comes with these larger rectangular shaped pieces of paper, as well as these often textured square shapes of paper. And I'll just buy the packs every time they get on sale. I usually wipe out their like stock of whatever they have at the time, and I put it in my big tower organizers that really frequently get spiders in them, so it's the only downside of using them. I have to like run the gamble of like encountering a spider, but usually I get lucky. But I have all the different colors, all these ones I picked up, and I just paste them in, draw over the top of them. I'll mostly often use them for writing like the media that I was exposed to on the day on top, and I'll often cut it down to like kind of accommodate for the shape, but sometimes I'll do it to do like more interesting compositions and drawings and whatnots. And lastly, something that saves my life all the time are circle templates, because I can't draw circles for the life of me. So I have to rely on circle templates to save me. I also have other templates for other things like different lines and curves and shapes and such, but the circle templates are the ones that I gravitate towards the most. And a couple other miscellaneous things. I already showed you my eraser of choice, but I tend to just use glue sticks wise when gluing things in. I just use Elmer's glue sticks because it's really easy to find, it's super accessible. You're not gonna have a hard time finding these if you run out. And I also like to use sticky notes to glue in for things a lot of the time. I'm not going to show you because they're all on the other side of the room right now. I've been doing a little bit of reorganizing and I'm not that far in. And I also like using stickers. I'm not going to show you like specific examples of stickers that I have because I have too many and it's not going to be representative of the stickers that I have. Even showing you washi tape that I have is a little bit of like non-representative and a little bit of a stretch. But I love using stickers. I usually have to glue them down in order to make them stick because not all the ones I have are that good of quality. But I like using stickers here and there as long as it's not too big of a sticker that dominates too much of the page because then I have less room to draw. But that's it. That concludes my video on my favorite art journaling supplies. We did a lot of swatching here, a lot of orange colors on this page. I hope this was interesting to you and you found something new that you might want to check out or satisfied your curiosity or turned you away from things that you definitely don't want to try. In any case, I will see you guys soon. I hope you have a wonderful day and keep on journaling.